Hi guys, swim done. It's definitely a bit nippier now. It's 8 o'clock, so that's fair. At the time of recording this anyway. Sounds like a ransom note at the time of recording this. Walking barefoot as well, I've become a real hippie. Just watching the, I actually just finished watching the Liver King documentary, Your Primal Tenets. The 9 primal tenets. Because, yeah, you know, you take a shit ton of anabolic steroids, 11 grand worth of pharmaceutical grade human growth hormone, and then of course primal man had lots of guns to defend the house. What a mad story that is. What a mad country America is. Isn't that why we love it? Bloody lunatics. Right? It must be because there's such a high population of Irish. Anyone who has a bit of Irish blood's a little bit mental, aren't they? We're all a bit tapped. But yeah, there's always something that sticks in my head and something that I want to rant about. And that topic is boredom. So I want to do a deep dive into boredom. Made a short video and asking you guys, what do you do when you're bored? Get you to behave. only helpful suggestions here, please. Like there's a thing that I watch. It's a lad called Stephen Curry, and it's Steve Alcohol Free Life. And Steve is he's a really good guy, and I've commented a few times on his channel just saying how much he's helped me, stay sober. Kevin O'Hara's another one. Habits V2, if you want to check that out. As I say, I don't diagnose myself as an alcoholic. I've never been diagnosed as one. Though probably not far off in some cases. I've never been one who drank during the week, or at least not habitually drinking alcohol. What I would do is I would binge drink at the weekends. As I'm sober, there's a lot more clarity, I will say that, and I think everyone would agree. Steve and Kevin, they would certainly agree with that, I would say. One thing though as well, and they talked about it a lot, it's boredom. You realise you have a lot more free time when you're thinking, oh, I'll plan going out and getting absolutely shit-faced. Because how does it normally work? I'd say a majority of people do this. More people do it than don't in Western countries anyway. I'd say a vast majority of the world have these behaviours. So I think it definitely warrants looking into. What do people do? So, most people work their 9 to 5 job and then they get absolutely shit-faced at the weekend, rinse and repeat. And that's a vast majority of people, I would say. I don't buy these statistics that less people are drinking. I think people are more mindful of it. I'd say they're not drinking as much purely because they can't afford to, that's probably a good thing. But like pints used to cost only like €2 and now they cost €5. And that's the cheapest. That's pretty good. Like if I see €5 for a pint, I'll get that, I'll get loads of them. Some places in Wexford still do it. Some places in Galway, I believe, in the West, it's €4.50. Anyone let me know if I'm correct. Throw a bit of business your way. As I say, I haven't completely given up, but I'm seriously contemplating giving up completely, kind of going, that's it, I'm done. I haven't had a drink now since Geez, what would it be now? The 19th of June. And that's having gone 52 days without having any, and then having a slip up when I met a friend in Wexford town. Becoming a Wexford man now, truly. Because I call it Wexford, locals call it Wexford, they don't call it Wexford town, FYI. So going from Gorey to Wexford, but we're in Wexford, no, Wexford. Wexford town. Quare good. Quare, the beautiful Wexford word. What a word it is. But yeah, how do you... I mean, peer pressure is one thing, but if literally everybody else is doing it, what's stopping you from doing it, you know? It's the thing that I talk about all the time, which is people can tell you not to drink, they can tell you not to smoke, but if you see them doing it, naturally you want to do it more. And I think it's something that really warrants talking about is how is alcohol portrayed? You see it a lot more when you're not drinking. You know, you start to notice how it's portrayed. Not only is it associated with having a good time, but when someone gets in after a long day's work, what do? They pour themselves a glass of whiskey. You know, they have a few beers. Every TV show I watch, as soon as someone gets in the door, they're having a few beers, they're having a glass of whiskey. They have a hip flask with them. Just in case life gets too much. Gotta have the hip flask. And they look really cool as well, hip flasks. But on your break as well, you're smoking, aren't you? We associate that with relieving stress. Having a smoke. Very unhealthy things. Very unhealthy things. I was only talking about that with the occupational therapist today, Breda, who I'll be having a break with her for a while since I'm starting my scheme. You know, getting back to work properly. Well, not properly, you know, but it's a chance for me, you know, it's an opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. So it'll basically add more money to my disability allowance. It'll top it up, you know. And it's very limited, right? So with me not doing rugby coaching, I have time to be doing this, and then also I can go back to the coaching when it starts back in September, which is really good. I'm looking forward to that, but just trying to get my thoughts together. I was talking to Breda about, you know, smoking. She used to smoke and she was saying she gave it up and she doesn't even think about it now. And I was just joking with her saying, I used to smoke on breaks because if you've had a stressful day and everybody else has gone for a smoke, not only do you cave to peer pressure, and we were joking about Rachel from Friends that wanted to be part of the smoking gang and taking up smoking, but it also tasted better, you know, it tasted good when I was stressed, which was very weird, you know. It was like Monster and Red Bull energy drinks. I hated the taste of them. I remember not having one for a while. First time I ever had one, I said to my mum, that tastes like piss. She was delighted because it's toxic stuff and kids were just whacking this stuff back. I'm talking about people who are under their teenage years. Responsible parenting. In fairness to my mum, she didn't let me have it till I was 13 or 14. And that was with me begging her for it. And it tasted like piss. Really did. It was disgusting. And I used to whack this stuff back when I was tired. You know, say if I needed a gym session, little boost, I'd have that. And the sugar-free stuff just didn't do the thing for me, you know. Because what most people don't seem to know is that caffeine doesn't actually give you energy on its own. You know, it's the sugar that's going to give you the energy hit. What the caffeine's going to do is stop you feeling tired. Just looking for a sea glass. Nope. But why am I talking about all these things? Because I used to do all of them, and none of these things are heavy drugs. You know, they're all socially acceptable, which is mental, because I think like more people die of alcohol and tobacco related deaths than anything else. Like COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Basically your lungs are diseased, you know, they're not functioning at 100% because you've poisoned them. I have a great uncle with that, you know. Ironic that his nickname is Flash, because he used to be a really good runner. Gone are those days now because, you know, he poisoned his lungs with cigarettes. It's mental to me looking back how many unhealthy habits I did that were perfectly acceptable. And the reason I did them was because I was stressed. You know, the difficulty now is that I'm bored and there's a vacuum that needs to be filled, essentially. And this is what I use to do it. It's a great way of doing it, you know. It's probably the healthiest way you can do it, without putting all this shit into your body. You know, like all these toxic energy drinks that are filled with God knows what type of poison, which is gonna rot your liver and kidneys. Cigarettes that are gonna rot your lungs, of course. Then the alcohol. I mean, alcohol destroys a lot more than just the liver. Fuck with your kidneys, pancreas. Lots of people die of pancreatitis that drink heavily. But also, fatty deposits build up in your heart. You know, you can get blockages. I'm so grateful that I'm aware of this stuff now, you know. But the thing remains, like, it actually does help you have a good time. There's no denying that. And I'm not saying never, you know, never again. Not yet, anyway. We're kind of living off that motto just for today, right? Because it is a good motto, I do like it. I'm not a big fan of AA, as I've said, because I'm a competitive person by nature. So if I was to get a year's sobriety chip, let's say, I would then go, oh great, now let's get 2 years. You have to start from square one, you know, by one mistake. One little mistake and you're back to square one. And I would beat myself up so much about that. Whereas the way I'm doing it, I'm like, look, 52 days sober, one little slip and I'm straight back to it, you know. As I say, haven't had a drink since the 19th of June. And I am blessed to live in times where there's a lot of good people out there who are giving free information. Some people, even there's a channel called Liver Disease. I don't know if that poor fella died, but he's dying if he's not dead already, because it got to stage 4 liver disease, and there's no coming back from that. And that kind of dawned on me. I was like, holy shit, you know, fuck, that's true. But getting from that mindset to a few pints with mates, it's so different, you know. I associate alcohol, as I said there, not only with having a good time, but with stress relief. Come in, you've had a really stressful day, now you relax. Not only do you relax, you have a few beers to get rid of the anxiety, and you've earned them, you know, you feel like you've earned them, and you have. Just more sea glass, no, none there. That's really fucking with our reward system, you know. It's a vicious cycle, because what happens is we think, okay, get through this week, just get through it, and you know what, there's a few nice cold pints waiting for us. I need to stop because I sound like I'm advertising them, but I look forward to them so much. We'll loosen up, you know, have a good time, and guess what, More like a vegetable then for the rest of the weekend. After rugby games, the hard work is done, you know, you've put the training in all week. Now it's time to go wild, let yourself go mental, you know, have a few pints, have a few smokes. I mean, how unhealthy is that? And what's the reason you start playing a sport in the first place? To be healthy. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realise, you know. They think, oh, when you're into your sport, surely you don't smoke, you don't drink. Everyone, nearly everyone that I've met, if they don't drink really heavily, they take drugs. Loads of people that took cocaine every weekend, like it was going out of fashion. So many unhealthy habits. I literally remember right after, so we'll go before a rugby game. It was so toxic, you know. There'd be lads with this smelling salts, and is anyone saying Tyke Byrne when he's putting the smelling salts, the ammonia, because it's a terrible smell. And Jack Conan, who I've met, and I big fan of Jack Conan, he's a sound lad. He's there making a face. He doesn't need that shit. He's a natural beast. And he's been terrific on the Lions tour, just saying. But what everyone sees on the screen is the sport, you know, and obviously those guys are trying really hard and they're at their physical peak. But I remember, and I'm sure like it goes on at that level, where they're whacking pre-workout into them. Why I keep using rugby is because I've played it for so long. You know, and I'm thinking I'll go back to that, but I'm also extremely anxious about drinking again, because I don't even think anyone will have to peer pressure me into it. I think I'll want to do it because that's what I associate rugby with. And I've played from all the way up, you know. I've played from underage and then straight into big boy rugby. No break, no gap, straight in, and now you're able to drink with all the men. There's a real sense of belonging, you know. And when you don't feel like you belong for a long period of your life, and I mean life, because that's what it was like. Might sound like I'm being dramatic, but I'm not. Now you're able to drink, you know, you're able to smoke, you're able to whack all the pre-workout into you. What's that damage, like, what's the damage to your heart, your kidneys, your liver, your pancreas, everything? Because it all has to go through it, your body, you know. Like, there were guys I knew that were in great shape, and why were they in great shape? Because they were also using anabolic steroids. Those who weren't admitting it, you could tell. Yeah, you could fucking tell. Like, you see them and they're in terrific shape. You have the big bicep veins and chest pump, ripped abs, and I'll make a video on that in the future, because I think that's something I'd like to talk about. I really do think that it's worth noting that a lot of young men are sold a pipe dream, you know, and the glory stories, whereas rugby actually has a very dark, unspoken about steroid use. Now, lads would tell me what they took, so that's obviously something that I was considering at one point, like, seriously. But what I actually saw was I saw recreational drug use, and that was habitual, you know. They would do that every week, and they talk about parties they'd been at with professional rugby players, and say, oh, he's a big cokehead, you know, he loves his coke, and those guys would be smoking, and that's not what you associate with professional athletes when you're a young boy with a dream. But that's what actually happened, you know. And there were guys who were semi-professional, guys that I played with, that I was lucky enough to play with, really good players, but they were very open about what they used. And some of them were really sound guys, but also in the senior cup, you know, so they went to really elite private schools like St Michael's, who've churned out how many Leinster players, Clongowes, Blackrock, Belvedere, and they'd all tell me, you know, these mad parties that they'd be at, or when they were in the senior cup. Because these guys have money to burn, a lot of them, you know. A lot of them, you know, a lot of them would buy a bag, no bother, and people think, you know, scumbags they associate drugs with, but cocaine is the wealthy man's drug. That's something I saw get passed around very often, you know, and I wouldn't have considered myself a party animal, and yet I saw it openly used. I've used it myself, you know, so. And it didn't really do an awful lot for me, you know. It gave me more energy, you know, so that I felt like I could go again, you know, and God knows if I'd stuck to that. People who sell it and people who use it are not necessarily very nice. They're usually quite toxic people. The dealers are obviously scum of the earth, you know. Because I mean, you're dealing a drug to someone that could potentially ruin their life to make a profit, and you're making a killing, quite literally. It's just the amount of death associated with Class A drugs, you know, so anyone who deals it, you know, they're not a good person. I mean, you know, you can say someone who gives it to a friend, and still, it's such a bad drug. You know, I'm glad that I never got into that, because I have an addictive personality. Luckily I'm a bit of a tight arse with money, because money's not always been something we had. I'm not saying we were poverty stricken, you know, but we've been skinned, so I learned to be better with money. But I'm getting off topic anyway. The point I'm making is, I associated playing sport with health, you know, being healthy, exercising, and on my own I got myself very fit and healthy. You know, I was using protein powders that made my stomach feel, you know, or do somersaults. They're very toxic as well, protein powders. I was putting everything into my fucking body except, you know, the good stuff, the anabolics, but I probably would have done it if they were offered, you know, truth be told. I'm gonna be honest, because I wanted to get somewhere once upon a time. And then I realised maybe I don't, you know. And it's unfortunate, because the rugby part I loved, then I didn't, then I loved the drinking part. And then I had to realise the drinking part is why I might have to give it up for a while. Both rugby and drink. And now that leaves a void where you're kind of like, okay, what now? Trying to be healthy, get my walks done every day, cycles done. Not those kinds of cycles. Quick. But as I say, I can't speak to actually witnessing people taking anabolic steroids in rugby, but they talked about it very openly, and they used recreational drugs, and I got to see that very openly. That was very, very open. So with me, that basically gave me the green light, because while I have used them, I didn't use them as often as everybody else. I was just drinking, you know, very heavily, but it justified it for me. Now I find myself, you know, at a bit of a crossroads where, what are you going to use to kill boredom? Exercise is a very good one. Sometimes I find that I self-isolate, so, you know, be in my own company, and there's usually a lot less to talk about when you're not drinking, because, hate to say it, but you're not having as much fun, you know. There's a lot of delayed gratification. Nowadays we're used to instant boom 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 hits of dopamine. We're used to being gratified instantly, and I think it's harder to break away from that now more than ever. Even on this phone, like, you can get instant gratification with TikTok, with Instagram, with reels on YouTube, Snapchat, everything. Never mind recreational drugs. Some people use them every day. Like, I know people that smoke weed every day. They use cannabis every day. There's some people that will drink 4 days a week and are holding down full-time jobs. How long will that last? You know, that's what I'm always thinking about. I'm like, obviously you have to live for the now. You know, you can't always be holding out for what when I'm older. You know, what happens when I get older. You need to live now, but there's a fine balance between living now and doing something that could fuck up the rest of your life, potentially. So I just think it's something to take note of, you know, take heed of addiction being everywhere, and it's a really easy thing as well. So like, I was addicted to working hard, you know, exercising. I always had something going on, and then I could take a drug afterwards and feel better. Use caffeine and sugar to keep me going, keep me stimulated. If I felt anxious or stressed at work, have a cigarette, and then come the weekend, have a few drinks, you know, take the load off. Could smoke a joint with friends as well. You know, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of addictions coexisting. And really, it's going to sound very hippy-dippy, but it's so you don't have to look within. It really is, because one thing I've been doing a lot of since I'm sober is reflecting, self-reflection. And I don't like what I say. But, like, in all seriousness, I look at myself and I think of all the deficits, you know, all the things that I didn't have that I've been working on, you know, and I'm able to work on them now because I'm sober. You know, I was putting off so many things because I was always drinking, you know. And that's one thing, you know, like, I'm working on myself an awful lot, and I've become a lot more confident through not drinking as much, being more mindful of it. And it always knocks me for six when I do. You know, when I go back and I drink. Fucks me up, ruins my progress. I feel terrible, you know, the negative thoughts start spiraling into my head. And that's a horrible place to be. But I also think to myself, I have difficulty socialising anyway. You know, I always did, even as a kid. I couldn't talk to people as easily as most of the people around me. So I have a deficit in that. And, you know, everybody around me is drinking. It's like a green light, you're good, go ahead. So I guess choosing who I hang around with, that's important as well. You know, very important. You know, I've been dating, I've not been in a full-time relationship, but when I go out with them, they're drinking, and it's like, oh, let's have a drink, you know. It's usually a part of the day is that we're both drinking and having a good time, and genuinely having a good time, you know. At least I'm putting myself out there, but I don't know, I don't think I could be with someone who was always drinking, because that'd be the green light. Yep, you're good to go. You go ahead. Do you know what I mean? And let's face it, dates are more fun when people are drinking. They are. When you're nervous on a date, what do? You have a drink. I fucking sure as hell did. This is my natural anxiety cure right here. It really is. It's therapeutic. It really helps me out so much. But you know, there are days like this where you're starting to think life is feeling a bit monotonous. I bet a drink would perk me up. It probably would, to be fair. There's also the thing of overeating. A lot of people, when they give up cigarettes, they start eating a lot. You know, they gain a lot of weight. There's a lot of people as well who they chain smoke when they stop drinking, and they think anything to keep my mind off the drink. That's very unhealthy as well. Anybody remember when Lit gives up drinking and he's really struggling with sobriety, but he goes in and he buys like 3 different brands of cigarettes, so he's got like 60 and he starts smoking them like there's no tomorrow. I mean, gonna be fucking up your heart and your lungs, so trade them in for the liver. It's just swapping out one addiction for another. Sober living ain't easy, you know. I think the one thing that I really want to hammer home is boredom. I think is why a lot of people relapse. You know, if anyone has any experience and could say more about this, please do. You know, I'm not claiming to be an expert. In fact, quite the opposite. Happy to be educated. Leave it down below. Your sobriety journey, or if you ever had a problem before, how you manage now. Because I've seen it can be devastating. And it's usually at this point where I start craving and I start going, oh, you know, I'm not even able to have any fun, I'm not able to enjoy myself, so I may as well have a fucking drink, throw in the towel. Then the negative thoughts come back, you know. This definitely helps, like being here and swimming and everything. Just got to manage every day, you know, day by day. You've got to do something that fills the void left by the alcohol, you know, the boredom. Because that's going to come, you know. That's definitely going to come. Without a doubt. Ooh, found that blue piece that I was looking for. Oh, look at that. That turquoise kind of colour. But yeah, guys, let me know what you do anyway, and how you manage it. It's not easy, but building a community will definitely help. Alright, and I'll leave you with this.